with us on Blue Sky, use the following handle, Meetup. Everything is right here for you to go through. And then if you want to speak, have a suggestion or a feedback, um, just send us an email. For some reason you joined after this and you couldn't access the shares, just send out an email to us at DBA-VUG@outlook.com. We do monitor it fairly regularly, so you will not be unattended. Maybe a couple of months. Hi, John. And when do we meet? We meet second and the fourth Wednesdays. First, we do the lunchtime Eastern session, and then the other one is the lunchtime Pacific session. So we try to cover the entire continent as much as possible. So these are this is the place where you can find the recordings, which is usually asked at least 3 other times during the entire presentation and towards the end. So I will keep this readily available later on also. But yes, some awesome sessions coming up. Haripriya will be here in approximately 2 weeks' time. She'll talk about loading data faster into SQL tables and so on and so forth. Then comes the other free events that we have, like SQL Saturdays and Data Saturdays. Guys, I cannot emphasize enough. Go ahead, attend any of these that you can. Today and tomorrow, by the way, are the date palindromes. So no matter how you type your date, it'll still be the same. So like 5/28/25 is reverse 5/28/25 as well. But there is a SQL Saturday Boston coming up in September, and November is SQL Saturday Houston just before the PASS Community Summit. So we look forward to seeing all of you there if possible. Try to make a vacation out of it too if you can.
And St. Louis is the 25th of October.
Oh, see, that's why Julie signed in. I now know what happened. Okay. So, yes, thank you, Julie. I'm so sorry. You didn't pay me enough. So, cool. And then the PASS Summit coming up on November 17th through 21st. Um, do attend. And it's a huge event, guys. If you think you're learning a lot today and that you are drinking from a fire hose on a SQL Saturday, wait till you go to the PASS Summit. It's like actually you are in the Atlantic Ocean. So look forward to seeing you there as well. But PASS is also going out on a tour, which is New
Yes.
York City, Dallas, and in Netherlands. So if
And
you
if
can,
you are in New York City, come say hi because I'm going to be in New York. I know that's not
Dallas,
terribly far away from
Boston, yeah,
Boston. So
was.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people go there actually for SQL Saturday. I know Surbi, Teo, John Miner, and I think 2 more people went there to speak. I think George Walters, for example. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I might speak at Dallas. They've had a lot of issues with getting people there because so many people are going to Fabric Conference. So let's just say the number of people attending that's going to be a little on the slow side. So you might want to like go to the one in New York instead. And I'm not
oh,
just saying that because I'm there.
cool. And then, yes, Ginger will be speaking for the Houston area SQL Server user group next Wednesday. And then she's also doing a full day pre-con for SQL Saturday Houston. And she's going to be talking about Fabric all along. And then, yes, if you can use this code UGRP001, you should get $150 off your registration. And 150 is a lot of money, guys. Cool. And then, without much ado, my good friend Ginger, she'll be talking about SQL database in Fabric. I hope you guys can learn. If you have any questions, please type them along. Me, Surbi, and Julie are monitoring it. We will get to them as soon as humanly possible. But without much ado, Ginger, take it over, my friend.
All right. Thank you very much. Let me get my screens all organized up here. So, as you may know, this was basically a series that you have going on here for your user group, focusing on SQLDB and Fabric. And this is something that Microsoft added to Fabric in December of 2024. And it's still in preview. They're still kind of working some of the kinks out of it. And I'm going to kind of talk about some of the things that you might want to keep in mind if you are considering implementing it. Like I said, though, it is still in preview, and I know that there are some people who say like, "Oh, it's in preview, we can't touch it," which is unfortunate for you. But it's a really great thing to learn. The other thing too is that I think that um, it's one of those things that even if you're like, "Yeah, I'm not doing Fabric, I'm just doing SQL," would not be surprised if they don't start bringing some of this stuff to the Azure SQL DB, because Microsoft likes that one version of code, and they've added some things which are really quite cool that I wanted to definitely discuss with all of you. So let's get started. A little bit about me. I am principal consultant at my consulting company. I am a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. If I get renewed again, and this will be 10 years. And I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer and obviously a fan of this new website that I found, QR Monkey, that allows me to create colorful QR codes. So I put in all of my contact information there in little QR codes because it's fun and I can do it in colors. So let's get started talking about SQLDB. So what is SQLDB inside of Fabric? Well, surprise, surprise, it is a version of Azure SQL DB. And you may be wondering, it's like, well, why do you have that anyway? For those of you who don't know, who aren't regular Fabric users, and I'm sure there's some of you who I'm speaking to who are not, there are some limitations with the way that SQL has been implemented inside of the lakehouse and warehouse. And as good as they are not full-on SQL databases. But I was talking to Connor Cunningham of Microsoft when I was at SQL Saturday in Austin, and he was telling me that inside of Fabric, the lakehouse and the warehouse have a hidden MDF. So if you're wondering how they could be so much like SQL Server, there's an MDF back there because Microsoft wants to provide as much feature functionality as they can. But they can't do everything because it is still a lakehouse and warehouse are still primarily based upon Spark technology. And as such, there are some limitations with what you can do for things like indexing and the entire SQL stack. That's not true with SQLDB. SQLDB is SQLDB. What you can do inside of Azure SQLDB, you can do it inside of Fabric. Some things, for example, that are not possible to do inside of a lakehouse or a warehouse is indexing. You really don't have much ability to improve your queries going forward like you can in the SQLDB. While they have recently added the ability to add temp tables, which is something very new, it happened at Build, to give you an idea of how new of a feature that is. It is not you can't do cursors and triggers. And if you're thinking, well, you shouldn't do them anyway, I know that there are a lot of people who want to just lift and shift their code from one place to another, and you really can't do that with a warehouse or a lakehouse, but you can with SQLDB. And the other thing that Microsoft is targeting towards including a SQLDB inside of Fabric is the ability to make it easier for developers by providing a lot of tools, which we're going to take a look at, that make it much easier to manage. They have positioned a SQLDB is for the AI generation, so you don't need to know as much. It does a lot of things for you. It will identify, for example, queries of interest. Hey, look, there's high IO going on here. There's high CPU going on here. Just flag it and do it. And it does auto indexing. So if you're like, I'm not very good at indexing, that's fine. It'll do it for you. Now, of course, if you know what you're doing, and I'm sure some of you do, you can add your own indexes, and I won't get rid of them. But the indexes that it creates, it will. Why? Well, let's say that you have an application that is the back end for the application for your SQL DB. And the developers changed that application so that the SQL being run on it isn't the SQL that was maybe run on it last month. Auto indexing will look at it, monitor the usage, monitor the queries, and do things like, oh, queries have changed. I'm going to delete this one and I'm going to add this particular index because it is more suitable for the traffic that is currently going on. So that's the kinds of things that you will get with SQL DB. Now, auto indexing also exists inside of Azure SQL DB. The difference is, Azure SQL DB. The difference is in Azure SQL DB, you can turn it off. And SQL DB inside of Fabric, you cannot. So it doesn't work the same way. So again, they designed this to be very developer friendly. And well, let's just say I've worked with a bunch of developers and I know how they design databases. Every single table should have an ID because it's easy to code, right? So all the primary keys are called ID. How many of you besides me worked on one of those? Yeah, happens. So what we want to do is we want to provide the ability for developers to do what they will in the way that they're used to doing it, which means it needs to do like quite a good things with JSON. And it needs to be very performant because are they going to tune their apps? Probably not. But it's very important to be able to monitor what is going on, to track what's going on, and to troubleshoot. So SQL DB inside of Fabric has provided a number of tools that'll do that we're going to be taking a look at so that we can further improve the ability of the database to work using AI. So this is really, I like to think of the tuning and the performance monitoring. This is kind of like vibe. Like I know that vibe coding is now a thing. Vibe coding is basically like Python. I don't know how to write Python, but I've got Copilot. I'll go ahead and do it. That's vibe coding. You can do the same thing inside of Fabric when it comes to performance monitoring. Performance monitoring, I'm not a DBA, but I've got Copilot and I've got Fabric, and it'll do most of the important stuff for you. And that was a mindset that they used for that. So another really cool thing that it can do is it can do a lot of different alerts. Because frankly, you do want to notify somebody who's got a brain periodically, right? So you can block queries, or excuse me, you can create alerts for queries that are blocking other things so that somebody can go fix them. So this is really going to help you monitor it over time because when bad things happen, you'll find out because you'll be notified. CPU usage, all of a sudden that goes up, then you'll be notified. Allocated size, if allocated size is a problem, then you can be notified. And this is going to allow you to act before you have to go look at it like, oh crap, all this stuff is going on. No, you find out. And then you can proactively decide what you're going to do about that. How are you going to handle these issues? What are you going to do to resolve them? Now, because of course, there's many different things that you can do for this to be able to handle, these different scenarios. So with alerts, they're going to be going on the database. And you'll also see the ones that have happened within the last 24 hours. So you'll get a picture of what things have happened recently. And if you resolve them, they're gone. They disappear. They're no longer in alert status. So let's take a look at the kinds of things that you see inside of the performance dashboard of SQL DB inside of Fabric. So there's a lot of work that I have to do to set this up. So this is going to be a can demo. We have here is a Azure SQL DB inside of Fabric. Looks just like a regular DB, acts like a regular DB. Unlike other elements in Fabric, there's no query analyzer. You just do query. You do notice some little interesting things up here, like the new API for GraphQL and also the performance summary. And we can see in the performance summary that we've got an issue because in our performance summary, there is a little bell next to it. And that little bell is letting us know, ding, ding, you've got something going on here that you might want to take a look at. Now, whether or not Copilot is enabled, that has everything to do with your item. Notice here, you've got this orange bar too saying, warning, your Fabric SQL database performance is critical and needs your attention. So it's going to provide you a lot of information going, hey, you need to go do something. Let's take a look at what we have going on in our database so that we can look to see how we could possibly resolve this problem that has been identified. Now, in addition to having these warnings show up, you can get emails from well. So you see that you got the performance icon, you get the alert message, and you also have this performance summary pane. And you can take a look at this pane and it'll tell you, hey, what's going on? Well, alert, CPU consumption is currently high. And if we look at CPU consumption, we can see that we've got 1.12 vCores, and it has gone up 744% over the last week. We don't have any block queries to speak of, but the CPU consumption is definitely going to be something that we're going to want to take a look at and make sure that we can figure it out. So block the other elements not showing any issues. It's showing us, some things that we can look at if we want to, but really what we are wanting to look at is the CPU consumption. We won't see any notifications for anything in that normal range, just for things that are showing high. And yes, it does show the red green stuff, but at least it does also show that what's going on. So we're going to go ahead and click on that warning and take a look at our CPU consumption and see what's going on with our CPU consumption. And we can see here a list of a graphical view of what's going on. And notice the red dots over there on the right-hand side of the screen. Those red dots are showing us time where our CPU cores are really critical. That's why it says critical there at the bottom left-hand side. Say, look, critical. We can also see that our database varies quite a bit in the past 24 hours for when it's getting a lot of consumption. So we've got a list of top CPU performing queries that we can take a look at as well. And we can also take a look at what's going on with this warning. And it's showing that how many vCores that we have. And we can view the data for that time as well if we want to on that little warning. So we can see that we've got some things to look at, and we can look at every single one of these data points and take a look at what has gone wrong in that element. Now, if we look here, just scrolling by, we can see the names of the different objects that are being run, the total CPU, and currently it is doing that by CPU. So let's take a look at some of these top consuming queries and change our time interval to look at what is really getting us in that critical session. So we can see that we've got a number of queries, but the top one there is the one that's going to have the most issues, and that's 2757. And that's where we are inserting into a table using a select statement. Now, we give it an object name. This may be called by a person. It may be being called by an app. So we can mark this as a favorite, and we can leave it as a marked favorite. So we can kind of take a look at its performance over time, see how it's doing, and take a look at what's going on with it in the future. So we've all we need to do is basically take a look by clicking on it, and we can see what's going on with this query. What is it doing? And we can see that it's pretty simple query. It's basically just doing an insert with a select statement with some with a case when vote type ID, and then doing a group by. And we can see how many times it's been executed. We can see recently it's got 66 executions and from 2:30 to 3:30, and it had 10 the hour before that. So we can take a look at the performance, and we can also see that it's starting to go down. So it was a super big deal, but by the time we got around to looking at it, it's not that not an issue. We can look at it for the past hour, and we can see that it's trending down. So maybe that time that we decided to go out to lunch was a good thing, because there's not a whole lot to do at this point. We don't need to run around and do anything since it's dropping. Now we could also copy it and run this query to see what it's doing, and we can do that inside of Visual Studio Code and SQL Server Management Studio. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Azure Data Tools is being rolled into Visual Studio Code, so it's going away. So we can go back to the queries by clicking on that queries view there. And then we can take a look at other elements such as longest running queries. And we can see, hey, look, it's the same one. And the execution count of 66 times just took a lot of time. It's probably that group by. And then we can take a look at in our queries, which one is happening the most frequently. And we can see that we've got a select count from orders that is really high in terms of frequency. And then high read queries is again the one that is we have our alert on that insert statement. And we'd see that that favorite is still run through there. But we can take a look at average and see, you know, on average, how are things looking? And look at the average number of reads perhaps, because we're looking for high read queries and still, yep, same query. We can take a look at the past hour or the past 30 days. Now we do only have a 30-day window that we have for this, but we can take a look at things just in that time frame. If you want it longer than that, you are going to need to dump the data, which is something that you can do. So we've got things like CPU consumption and looking how high that is tracking. And again, this is over the past hour. And we can look at who's taking up all this space. So we can see the different users that have been included in this. And we can see that it's 9 different user connections here at the peak time. And we can see the names of the different users. We see these are all people, and we also have a service that is doing it as well. So we've got the Fabric SQL editor. It's obviously somebody's been playing around internally to get it to the kinds of numbers that we see here. We can take a look at it 24 hours. We can see that for a long period of time, nothing's going on. We can take a look at the requests per second. And again, looking at that over the past 24 hours, we can see there's a giant spike. But most of the time, it is performing very, very well. So we've got some kind of an anomaly going on, probably because someone's trying to do a demo. And we can see how many queries are blocked. Now, this is a really important thing to measure. We can see that we don't have too many, but when we had our period of high usage, we did have 7 queries that got blocked. So something that we're going to need to take a look at. We see also that we don't have anything to do right now because the blocking has stopped. So nothing going on right now, but we did have a time frame where we did have a number of queries that ended up getting blocked in the time frame where we had critical issues. So we can take a look at what's going on at any given point in time. We don't have to do anything. We just get this out of the box. We can take a look at the allocated size inside of the dashboard. And that's just good to, show us, how the size has been allocated over time. All right. So some of the things that we looked at are CPU consumption. And this is basically showing what it is in a historical chart. And at the bottom of the plane, you can see what's consuming a lot of different things. And you can do things like, hey, should I rewrite queries to be less CPU intensive? Is this a problem that is happening all the time? Is this something that's just happening right now? How do I need to change my application? Where is this issue happening? Is it somebody doing ad hoc queries? You can take a look at these different elements and determine what's going on inside of your database and not have to look very hard doing it. And for your query details, this shows you the number of executions of the query over time. You can take a look at the ability to compare that query performance, different time intervals. You can see if there's any changes recently, and you can look at querying the text and actually take a look at it at any given point and time. And all of this data, all of this data is obtained from your query store. So you can take a look inside of the query store and say, hey, is my query performing as I thought it would? Has it changed? Am I seeing it more often? I'm taking a look at those sorts of things. Oops. And if you're looking at queries, we can take a look at queries across different dimensions, high CPU queries, long-running queries, most frequent queries, and high-read queries. And queries can all be sorted by the total or the average. And this is going to just provide more information and more detail for the different elements. And actually, I am going to see if I can't flip over into my environment and show you what this looks like live. All right, so inside of my Fabric workspace. So this isn't going to be as good because, you know, it does take a while to set all of this stuff up, and I haven't done a whole lot with this recently, so it's going to be a little bit harder to figure out. But one thing that I can do is I can look inside of my monitor, and I can take a look at my different items. And this is great for people like me who can't remember more than half things that are going on. And I can look for my SQL DB. See if I can find it. It's not even seeing that. And you can look at the way that it works in different elements. So this is like very helpful to figure out. You can see that yeah, I've been doing a lot with notebooks, and so they have been blowing up. And we can take a look at, you know, what I've got going on inside of my environment. And this is in addition to what's going on in Fabric. Now, this brings up another issue that you might want to think about. So if we're looking at what's going on inside of the database, we also need to be cognizant of what is going on inside of our Fabric application. So I just wanted to take a look at this in respect to how you might also be monitoring SQL performance, because this is looking at everything that you've got going on inside of your different capacities. And yes, it is broken down by capacities. And we can see, you know, I've got, you know, varying capacity things that I've got going on. And we can take a look at different applications. This is the one that I wanted to take a look at, is my native SQL DB. Getting this to load. Unfortunately, it is really, really pokey when it loads the data. And this is the reason that I'm bringing this up is because inside of Fabric, everything is related. So if you have a SQL DB that is performing badly, maybe it's being starved for resources, because at present point in time, there's no way to dedicate resources to it. What does that mean? That means that if you've got somebody in dev doing dev things that takes a lot of CPU, because, you know, that's what happens in dev, you may have that may be an issue. And the reason why is that it can starve out the information that you have in your database. Because if, say, you've got a if you've got a whole lot of stuff going on, then you can't, there's none left over for your database. So your database can be starved because of that. So you may end up with less resources because somebody's playing around with streaming, for example. And there's no way that you can specify, I only want to have a certain amount of resources going towards anything else, so I don't starve out my SQL DB. You can't do that. And it is for that reason that Microsoft does not recommend that presently you use Azure, you use a SQL database for a production environment, because somebody playing around in dev could literally starve your database out of resources. Now, inside of warehouses, there is a private preview going on that will help you, that will help alleviate that problem. But that's not there yet, and it's not something that you see inside of SQL DB. But you can see here that I've got, you know, SQL usage, and then I can see my information about how I'm reading things. When you do copy data in or when you are running the SQL DB, it does copy all of your data into one lake. So it is so you have it accessible for any one lake capabilities. You don't have to worry about ingress or egress charges here. So I'm going to take a look at my my Acme DB inside of my fabric capacity. And I'm boring to name things like that. So I have a capacity called fabric. And I'm going to change my filter to SQL DB. Now, for those of you like me who are running a trial, at least I am for 14 days. If my trial lasts a month longer, it will be a toddling 2-year-old toddler, which frankly, I think is hysterical and hope that that does indeed happen. But let's take a look at my performance over time for my Acme database. Notice here it's got the SQL DB name on top of it. And we can take a look at performance summary, and then I have a some things I want to do with that. So, and as a matter of fact, yes, they have the capacity metrics app. One of the cool things that they did with it is they made it show up inside of a workspace. Now, one of the things that I find personally to be maddening about the Fabric capacity report, and you're bringing it up here, Tom, is that nobody has access to it. I was working for a client and I couldn't tell them that they're running out of capacity because they didn't give me access to the app. If there's no reason that everybody in the entire organization shouldn't be able to look at it, it's not going to hurt anything. You can't change anything. You might as well just see what's going on. But unless you have access to that app, you can't. Now I'm going to go ahead and run a couple of things here because I want to see just some of my queries, you know, just in my performance analyzer, just kind of start showing up. So I'm going to take a look at my performance summary. It's not going to be a whole lot because again, this is live, but we can see my CPU consumption. It's not that much, and we can see what has been allocated. Now, allocated matters because if you haven't played around with it in a while, then you may decide, you know what, do I really need to have one that's that big? Well, so this is a trial. The answer, of course, is yes. So I'm going to go ahead, though, and see if I do think that I've got past 30-day information. No, it was earlier than that. But we can see here's the queries that I've been running. And let's take a look at them. And I can do that by clicking on the query ID. And I did this on purpose and tried to create something kind of ugly because I wanted it to, you know, not to show up badly. And we can see here that I've got a query that I'm doing. I've got an ambiguous reference and just kind of playing around trying to make something perform badly. Now, if I wanted to, I can run this inside of SQL Server Management Studio. And this is going to copy the query and open the editor for me to do that. And it didn't. So I can go ahead and run it that way if I wanted to do that and, you know, create a new query, paste it. And so this is showing me that very nasty query that I was running so that I can play around and test it and see how to use it myself. And again, I just got that from my performance monitor. So, and it opened up another tab so that I can see both of them. This gives you an idea of something that you can do. And if you're like, I wonder how often this query is running. So it gives every query an ID, and you can take a look at, hey, you know, this one's been taking a lot of time. If I favorite this, I can look at this over time and see over time, hey, how has this performed? We can take a look at longest running queries. And we can see that my favorite is the longest running. Most frequent queries, not my favorite. It's looking at a select schema name query and high read queries. And taking a look at like the number of total logical reads that we've had going on. And I'm looking at total. I can also look at average. And if we look at average, we notice that my logical reads changed. On average, this particular query is taking a lot more time. So, and we can see that what I'm doing is selecting a schema and I'm doing a union. because I'm trying to do all the things that I can to make things ugly because, demos. So not so on purpose. This is a bad query. Don't judge me. I did it on purpose. So you can take a look at how all of these different things are working, and taking a look at how you do that. Any questions specifically about the way that the performance dashboard works and the kinds of things that you can see? All right. So I went live with my demo, so I didn't do this one. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about are different things when it comes to the user connections. So user connections is looking at the number of total time. And this is very helpful because it can see if you have an application, chances are you're using the same user ID within the application. So the table lists the number of connections, and you can look to see, hey, how many connections is the application really making? Your application may not be very efficient when it comes to up to management of connections. And so you may have ones that are just carrying over time, something that you might want to review. So you could also look at things like a request per second and maybe how many times a request is happening. Again, looking at the most executed. And maybe this, again, is supposed to provide insight to developers. So the whole thought about this was that this would be a great platform for a developer who's trying to create some kind of an app and needs a database for it. Instead of just throwing everything in SharePoint, create an actual database that you can monitor and see what's going on. Because sometimes, with code, hey, people forget, how it all works. And then, of course, looking at these blocked queries, because that's important. By the way, I should make this bigger. Ding, 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 ding. No lock is not the answer. Just in case you didn't know that. But if you're looking at blocking, you want to look at, if you're having blocks, if you're having locks, which query is blocking, and also which queries got blocked as a result of that. And every time you see a blocked query, you're going to get an alert. So you'll always be notified when that happens. And that way you can, hopefully ping the developer and say, hey, did you know you were doing this? And they may know. And then you can, help people rewrite code and saying, you've got issues. So more issues than vote, right? Okay. So let's take a look at allocated size. Now, this is also important because as of course, with all things in Azure, size is money. So you want to allocate the size that you need closest without going over. If you go over too much, yeah, you get cut off. Inside of Fabric, you have something called bursting, and you are allowed to go over the allocated license that you have to a point. If you go over a lot, then you get cut off, and then everything just was. So if you are running into that ceiling, you want to know about it because somebody's probably going to need to allocate more money to make the database bigger. The other thing that can happen is you may decide, look at mine, I'm like, 32 meg, what the hell you do that for? You're not using anything. And then you might want to dial it back, save your resources for something else. Are your tables growing larger than expected? You can actually look at the size of every single table. And it is something that is going to be useful to you so you can take a look at, is this growing more than I expected? That sort of thing. And the automatic indexing is really, really cool. Now, I know a lot of you are DBAs, and this does not interest you at all. However, I think that it is something really, really important. There isn't a week that goes by that I don't read something about AI not taking people's jobs. And that got really real for people at Microsoft when they said that 30% of the code that they're generating is from AI, and they had layoffs. And I am personally very saddened by some of the layoffs because some of my friends are now looking for work now. So if you know anybody who's hiring, go on LinkedIn and tell them. But automatic indexes are one of the things that are being assisted by AI. They are looking at, hey, what's a good index? So while you have previously perhaps dismissed auto indexing and like, yeah, I can do better, look at it now, because maybe you can and maybe you can't. This isn't SQL Server 2016. Times have changed and the auto indexing is actually really quite good. And the
Hey,
thing
Ginger.
about it, it's been dynamic. Yeah.
So is there like a specific nomenclature that it would use to these newly generated indexes? Like, in statistics, auto-generate statistics, they're always beginning with a WA something, right? Um,
Yes. Yes.
uh,
They have names like that. It's I believe it's BX. So yes, you know that they're theirs because of the way that they name them.
okay.
So they can be identified. So you'll see them be like, oh yeah, that one was auto generated. Good call. So yes, they are identifiable by their names. Um, and they're what's cool about them being dynamic is if when things change, they'll drop and they'll recreate. But if you, because like Paresh, you're a knowledgeable DBA and you know how to do stuff, if you create one, it's never going to mess with it. So if you're like, don't touch my stuff, it won't. It will never touch your stuff. But it will be dynamically adding and dropping all over the place, depending on what's going on. So really helping for performance for real-time action. So automatic indexes, when you're looking at that, this is kind of an issue with source control, right? Because if you put it in source control, you're going to get those? No, you don't. They are just kind of, they're there and they're not there. Um, it's and if you include them in part, because you can include them as part of your source control, but you might not. That's kind of a dumb idea. You didn't create them, but then again, if you wondered what they did, might be good to look at. And it also is giving some people some ideas if you actually do go look at what's going on about what indexes you probably should create. Because again, they're smarter. All right, so let's take a look at some more of the tabs that we saw inside of the performance dashboard to give us a better idea of what's going on with it. So we looked at some of the stuff with the different CPUs, looking at how that has gone on. Let's take a look at the users. Taking a look at the different users and seeing when they were peaking, when people are working, when nobody's doing any work, and we can see the number of user connections at a given point in time. Notice it tells us there are 9. So we can see that there were 9 connections at that point in time, but there's only 4 connections total. So obviously some people have been doing this multiple times. So we can of course change the interval, to take a look at different time frames. Looking at different requests, taking a look at kinds of requests per second, so looking at the data trending, we can see that in the past 24 hours, we did have a peak where we had almost over 2,000 requests per second, 2,454 to be precise. And then we can take a look at, again, our blocks. I'm not going to see much here since, don't have a whole lot of blocking going on, but we did have a little bit. And showing that we did have those critical blocked items that we had to take a look at. And why did that change? Well, people started doing different work. So we can take a look at that sort of items in there and then see what it's doing. Also could be that the automatic index got created to resolve it as well. But in our case, looking at what went on, it was probably just number of users just dropped off. And so the number of things that got blocked in that instance would flop off as well. Now looking here at our allocated size, we can see what the size trend is. And this is generally speaking going to be fixed unless somebody goes and tweaks it. And this is set for 3 terabytes. And that is what has been allocated, not what has been used. So you can see that the use size is quite small. And look here, you can see how much each table is consuming in terms of size. So each one, you can see how many rows it's got. and the size of it at any given time. And I love that because I think it's awesome. Now let's get into the automated indexes because we were talking about those earlier and taking a look at the ones that are going to get created for us so that we can see what's going on here. And didn't have any created in the past 24 hours. Notice here we've got created, reverted, and dropped. So we have all of that information that we can see that is available for it. Unfortunately, we're going to have to change the time frame to see more of them. But notice that all of those different statuses are included. Not much going on in the past 24 hours for this. But any ones that we would have would be here. So also look at the top. You can see when it was last refreshed, looking at how old or how new the data is that we are indeed looking at and trying to get something going on so that we can get some of these indexes to show up in here so that we'll have better data. Give this a minute to start generating something for us. So I did want to crank this up. See if we can see what the CPU is and then see, yeah, that started adding more stuff again. All right. So taking a look at the different things that were covered in this series, because I know that you're doing the entire series. For episode 1, that was the overview and getting started. Episode 2 was for data flows and notebooks. Episode 3, Gen AI and vector databases. This is really, really cool. I'm going to be talking about this in San Diego in September. So really interested in vector databases. Vector databases are important because of how generative AI notifies everything. So it's important to have it in that format so that you can use your data, to ground your queries. What does that mean? Well, obviously ChatGPT is nice and all, but it doesn't know anything about what's going on in your organization, which is a good thing because it's open source. But if you wanted to add that information, so you could ask, say, about the product catalog that your organization has, you might be using Gen AI to what's called ground it. So add that information in so you could ask questions about that internally and not give that to the planet, of course. And that was what episode 3 covered. Episode 4 was all about GraphQL. You know, my favorite way to write GraphQL is to go to Copilot and say, here's T-SQL. Rewrite this in GraphQL. Works for me every time. But if you are taking the DP 600 or DP 700 exam, you need to know it. GraphQL is a language that Microsoft invented originally for log analytics. It is designed to query files and things that don't change. There's no CRUD statements inside of GraphQL because GraphQL is designed to read large databases, things that don't change because they're so big, they just write a new record and they logically delete them. Episode 5 was the application lifecycle management. So looking at checking out how to implement CI/CD. I didn't talk about that, but that is something that is baked into Fabric. I could talk half-baked, but that's another story. And then this, the final episode in the series, where we're looking at how to monitor the performance of your dashboard going forward. So I hope you check all of these out. By the way, I don't know where all of them, was that before Cusco? Yeah. Cusco was actually developed for HBase, a conjunction for HBase queries, which is part of Hadoop. And Microsoft looked at, I think Microsoft created the language in 2015. It's been around for a little while. I still haven't gotten any good at it. Yeah, it's just different. It's very, very different. It uses pipes, by the way, if you are wondering about getting started with that, Carl. All right, so if you are looking for the previous talks that were given on it, AKMS Learn on Microsoft Fabric has them all recorded. And they're also recorded in languages like Portuguese, which is basically a way for Armando to talk about all the things. So if you've not previously checked out Microsoft's Reactor webpage, channel on YouTube, highly recommend it. They put a lot of great content on there and stuff that you never ever hear about. because to be honest, it's not all published very well. And they've been putting it, especially if you're looking for multilingual content or content on AI, they've got a ton of them. Fresh is going to be speaking on KQL. So if you want to know more about KQL than how to translate it using Copilot, listen to him, not me. And any questions about this? By the way, I know that I sent you these QR codes before because obviously I find them fun, but I also wanted to let you know that this last one you probably want because I have a free class on LinkedIn. And in this class, I do talk about SQL DB inside of Fabric. So if you want to know more, and it's not a very long link, you can do it for 24 hours, but I highly recommend it, especially if somebody else is paying for it, that you check out that class or a couple of other ones that I've got on there. But that one specifically has got content on SQL DB. So any other questions that you might have?
I think it seems like you have done a good job, Ginger. No questions.
Yeah. Everyone's in like a coma because, food, lunch, all that good
Yeah,
stuff.
no. This is really cool.
So what are you going to be? You're going to be talking all about KQL. Have you played much with it?
Not actually. I've essentially learned it only from the point of view of presenting it, because my previous job, we did not have a government. Government doesn't have Fabric, right? So, but Harris County, where I work now, they have a .com also.
Oh, wow.
So they're not just a government, but they're also for-profit kind of, I don't know, whatever they want to call it, but we have a Fabric there. So we can now actually start using it more religiously.
I had a friend that used KQL a lot. He worked for FedEx, and as you imagine, FedEx has a giant amount of data that they don't care about after 60 days.
Correct.
And the KQL, they use KQL exclusively for that because it is really good for extremely large files.
Large data sets, yes, exactly. And yeah, the funny thing is that whatever you ask and then you say explain, it will write out the exact same query for you in SQL.
Yes. Yeah.
So that is
That's my
so
favorite.
cool. I'm like, yay.
Yes,
And
that's my favorite part about it. The fact that you can get it to write T-SQL.
yeah, absolutely. So then Copilot and then this one too. So guys, for those who are not using Copilot, do not be ashamed to use it. You
No,
use the right tools, really.
seriously, because here's the thing, if you don't, the person sitting next to you will, and they will be more productive than you. And that's not
No,
good.
yeah, absolutely.
You should be the one who's most productive.
Cool. Okay. Surabhi,
Well, if you
any
don't have any
last
questions,
parting words? Yeah,
we'll get people some time back.
7 minutes back. Yay, definitely.
Woo-hoo.
So, folks, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. But I just posted the link to the DBA virtual user group recording as well. Just at about 17 minutes back. Feel free to use it. You'll really see a lot of videos from almost all of our previous sessions where the speaker has not objected to being recorded. We have all posted there. So, but otherwise, we can let you go. And Ginger, I'll see you next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Correct?
Look forward
Yes,
to it. See you then.
absolutely. Sure. And Surabhi, any parting words? She's
Thanks,
still in
Ginger.
Hey,
Hi,
Julie.
Julie. Yay.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, really
Oh,
good. I've enjoyed it quite.
cool. So Ginger, after you is Sunil. He's going to be speaking too. So he's also here today. So cool. It's nice to know. It's a small world. Yeah,
It is. It is.
cool. Okay, guys, I will stop the recording and I will hang around for a few more minutes in case you have any questions or want to see the modalities of how you would like to speak or something like that. This is a very good time to actually catch up with us. So
Thank you all.